Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Izuku had web quirk and got harem with Ochako, Momo and Sue, part 2. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Zedra13, link is in the description, also subscribe to our channel and like this video, so let's begin the video. Literally, as Izuku had just gotten healed up, the UA judges were already talking about the surprise turn of events with all that had happened and how the scores were already looking based on what they had seen alone. This has certainly been an odd exam this year. In tied first place we have examine number 2233, Katsuki Bakugo, with 0 rescue points, but an outstanding 77 villain points. He wasn't even slowing down during the second half when everyone else was. This kid is definitely tough. Then you have examine number 2238, Izuku Midoriya, on the opposite side of the spectrum, only scoring 10 villain points, but a massive 67 rescue points, making him tied with young Bakugo for first. It's been a while since we had two people come first in the exam. These two are complete opposites to one another, yet they are on the exact same level. Not to mention the pure speed and power that this Midoriya showed against the zero-pointer. It's been a very long time since anyone actually destroyed the thing in a way he did. Yes, but that brings us to the final matter. This Midoriya boy showed powers and techniques very similar to that of the vigilante Spider-Man, and this is something we can't ignore. Silence fell over the room for a brief moment. I agree, and we've never had a problem like this before. Just interview the kid to see if he's worth taking in or not. I don't have time for pointless decisions. Cold, as always in Izawa. But he does raise a point, why not interview the boy to see if he'd be an honest student at this school or not? So it's agreed then. Yes, all of them said in unison. I'll let President Mick know to bring him here right away. Back at the UA main building, Izuku was staring into thin air as he kept thinking over and over in his head about how he had failed his entry into UA and how he had failed All Might at being a proper successor. During his little days, Izuku failed to notice President Mick a couple meters behind him, now getting off the phone and walking up behind Izuku. Hey young listener. I need you to come with me. President Mick stated, putting a hand on Izuku's shoulder, startling him and completely shocking Izuku at the fact he was being pulled aside by one of his all-time favorite heroes. Yeah, sure, can I ask why? Izuku asked in nervous curiosity as both he and President Mick began walking deeper and deeper into the UA building until they reached a large metal door that only made Izuku gulp in a mixture of fear and nervousness. Sorry kid, you're gonna have to ask them that. President Mick boomed out, opening the door for Izuku, so he was faced with a dimly lit room with a bunch of Izuku assumed to be heroes sitting on chairs, all looking directly at Izuku. Not even being in the room for less than a second, and Izuku could feel the tension in the atmosphere and stood in front of the heroes patiently before the smallest one spoke. Exam 2238, Izuku Midoriya, age 15, born and raised here in Tokyo. You're a completely normal teenager, but then we had a look at what your quirk is. The small joyful voice spoke, which Izuku's eyes widened at as he recognized the voice from when he watched UA Sports Festival a couple months back. It was the school's principal, Nedzu. You've been registered as having no quirk since kindergarten, but this doesn't look like the movements of someone with no quirk. Just as Nedzu said, the screens behind him started playing videos of Izuku's performance in the practical exam. Crap. I didn't realize how fast I was going. I knew I would be a little fast, but not that fast. And of course I would get noticed if I used my webs. I'm such an idiot. Currently hating his naive self for not stopping himself from using his spider powers, Izuku just looked down at the floor for a couple of seconds as he clenched his fist slightly. When he finally looked back up though, Izuku went cold when he saw that some of the screens were changing to times when his Spider-Man fights were recorded by news reporters and amateur recordings. It was as if the teachers were comparing the two side by side. As you can see, we noticed a distinct similarity between you and the vigilante known as Spider-Man. So, we only have one question for you. Izuku's blood ran cold as the words came out of Nedzu's mouth. Are you or are you not the vigilante, Spider-Man? Ideas? Scenarios? Panic? Doubt? Fear? All of these things started to rush through Izuku's head like lightning as he kept thinking that there had to be a way out of this mess. He knew only two answers were acceptable at that point, but he knew that he was an awful liar, and the fact he'd been silent for about 10 seconds meant he was already screwed. Finally sucking up the courage, Izuku gulped, then looked at the shadow-covered Nedzu with determination, saying what he knew he couldn't avoid saying. Yes, I am Spider-Man. Though his body was full of courage, Izuku's mind was filled to the brim with fear, trying not to break the face he was forcing on. Every second that went by in silence, Izuku's fear grew more and more, to the point where sweat started to float down his head ever so slightly. Well, glad we got that out of the way, you can go now. At first the principal's words confused Izuku, but as they slowly sunk in, he realized that he now had the least possible chance of getting into UA at this point compared to everyone else who entered. He was a vigilante, why would a school for heroes accept him? Of course Izuku knew the risks of what he just did, but at this point he also knew one thing, one very important thing he knew and was told by others most of his life. It was all his fault. It was his fault that he showed his spider powers. He could have easily done better with just his natural speed, strength and stamina and not used his webs. It was his fault that he failed the exam, he took it too lightly, he should have taken it so much more seriously. It was his fault that he was going to disappoint All Might. That's when Izuku's mind broke. Already halfway home he just stepped into the closest alleyway and leant against a brick wall, holding his hands to his face just began crying, as if everything he had worked for was pointless because of his own choices. His stupid choices, not anyone else's, his. As tears seeped from his eyes and his body slowly slid down the brick wall into a little ball, Izuku couldn't stop the overwhelmingly negative memories flooding into his head. His loneliness ever since he was a small child. The constant bullying for being quirkless from almost everyone who went to the same school as him. Bakugo's constant abuse reminded him that he would always be weak and pathetic. His own mother telling him sorry over and over again for not giving him a quirk. All Might telling him to dream realistically and that he wasn't cut out to be a hero. His own weakness. It was almost as if his brain was forcing back every positive emotion and memory in his life and was feeding him all of his negative memories. You should just kill yourself. As those 5 words kept echoing through his, Izuku looked up with tear-stained eyes to see that Bakugo was standing in front of him with a very arrogant smirk. Pachin Izuku stammered out in shock, attempting to wipe away his tears and regain his composure, both of which failed miserably. "Didn't you hear me, you bastard? I said you should just fucking kill yourself." Bakugo shouted almost like a command, making Izuku flinch. Normally Izuku would just cry more or accept the abuse from Bakugo, but something felt different, like something in the back of his head was urging him to retaliate, like his very skin was crawling, telling his instincts to do something, urging him to fight. Izuku slowly slid his body up the wall, while his fists were clenched tightly to the point where his knuckles turned white. Do you even think about what you say to others, how it makes them feel, and how insignificant they feel? His voice traced with little hints of anger that Bakugo could pick up on easily. When did you get the fucking balls to talk back to me, you quirkless bastard? Bakugo gritted out in anger as he raised his hand in an almost claw-like style before he started threatening Izuku by making very small explosions in the palms of his hands. As he was used to doing for years, Izuku flinched at the sight of Bakugo's intimidation technique, but not even a second before another skin-crawling sensation went through his body, making his eyes and expression hardened while his right hand's grip became even tighter. All the while he now properly stood up in front of Bakugo, noticing that thanks to his quirk's little growth spurt, he was now actually taller than Bakugo by a couple inches. "What? Are you gonna hit me? Don't make me laugh, you shitty bastard. You couldn't even graze me if you tried." Bakugo laughed loudly in Izuku's face, making his urge to fight reach boiling point. Izuku didn't say anything, but instead rolled his right arm back and threw a powerful punch that put all of his body weight behind it, so he knew it would have a powerful impact when it hit. Izuku's punch was only met with one impact, and that was the rough crumbling feeling of a broken brick wall. Izuku began panicking immediately as he thought the punch was too hard, but when looked around not only did he see no trace of Bakugo, but there was no trace of anyone being in the alleyway except for himself. "What? I swear Kachin was here, that couldn't have been a hallucination, could it?" Izuku said to no one in particular before turning back to his currently stuck arm and pried it free with a slight struggle. As Izuku examined his arm for damage, he was noticing the hints of black shooting through his veins as the cuts and scrapes on his knuckles began to heal up extraordinarily quickly. The flashes of black couldn't help but remind Izuku of the black orb he had seen in his dream the previous night. Does the symbiote have anything to do about this? I mean, these bursts of anger only started happening after I saw that black orb, Izuku thought to himself as he watched his knuckles heal themselves quickly as they only had slight bloody grazes on them from the impact on the brick. "I'll go see Dr. Connors, maybe he'll know what is happening with me," and the symbiote, Izuku said out loud to himself as he blankly stared at his arm before making his way up to the roof and began running from rooftop to rooftop, not even caring if he got caught. He wasn't in the mood to care if he was honest with himself. But the soft usual thud he normally made, Izuku landed in Dr. Connor's lab and was met with a slightly energetic but welcoming voice. "Ah, Izuku. So good to see you again, you're just the person I wanted to see." Dr. Connors greeted with a large grin on his face. Hey, Dr. Connors, surprised by the sudden burst of excitement. Izuku took a step back but regained composure a second later, allowing Connors to notice the blank and almost depressed look on Izuku's face. So I took it and the exam didn't go well? Connors asked, losing some of the excitement in his expression. No, I was an idiot and I'm pretty sure I'm having hallucinations because of all this stress, Izuku said in a quiet, defeated voice while looking down at the floor, gritting his teeth slightly. Only a few seconds passed by before Izuku felt Connor's left and only arm on his shoulder and looked up to see Connor's expression as a soft and warm smile. I'll tell you this now, you are far from an idiot, Izuku. Not to mention you have an extraordinary amount of talent for a hero. Trying to get Izuku out of his depressed state, Connors attempted to let Izuku know that he wasn't doing anything wrong, but at the same time trying not to spill the fact about the rescue points, as All Might had let that slip a couple of days ago. I'm still a failure. Izuku mumbled before being met with a sigh from Dr. Connors, who had now taken his hand off of Izuku and walked towards part of his lab before pulling out a medium-sized metal suitcase and holding it in front of him before starting here. Raising a slight eyebrow at the gesture, Izuku took the suitcase from Connors and hesitantly opened it to see the other spider suit he designed. No, I don't deserve this. Similar to the web shooters, I followed your designs as much as possible but made a couple technical adjustments of my own design. Connors started with a small proud smile while Izuku held up the mask of the green and black suit, shaking slightly. Hey, you alright? Noticing that Izuku was shaking and now crying as he held the mask in his hands. I don't deserve this. Why? Why is everyone being so nice to me? First All Might, then Momo-chan and Yura-chan, and now you. I don't deserve all this at all. I've let you all down. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Izuku said as tears seeped out of his eyes, trailing down his face before splattering on the mask. Dr. Connors could only watch as Izuku slowly broke down in front of him as he couldn't do anything to stop Izuku from crying, as saying anything nice would make him in even worse state and it was out of the question to say anything negative as that would be even worse. Minute after minute went by with Izuku weeping out all of pent-up emotions, each tear feeling like a small weight was being lifted slightly from his shoulders. It wasn't until 15 minutes passed that Izuku could clear up his tears and not look like a complete mess. Sorry about that, Izuku apologized with a slight bow as it dawned on him that he was in fact still in Dr. Connors' lab. Connors sighed before helping Izuku back up to his feet before speaking. It's fine. Honestly, I'm not surprised you've broken down like this. You've done so much that stress was bound to build up and get to you. Connor confessed to Izuku as he pulled a seat from his lab desk and sat down on it facing Izuku. Izuku merely wiped his tears away and attempted to regain his composure before speaking again to the one-armed Oscarp scientist with a slight bow. Thank you for the suit and for understanding. His voice, still a little raspy from the breakdown, Izuku looked up at Dr. Connors with a determined look as he asked him if he could test the suit in the combat room, which he received with a smile and a yes. Normally Izuku would be over the moon from something like this, but right now he was more concerned of letting out his pent-up stress on the combat drones than having another breakdown. With the new suit in his left hand and the mask in his right, Izuku made his way into the combat room, almost relieved that he could do this. After slipping into his new suit and strapping the utility belt to his waist, Izuku noticed that the suit was a lot looser than he expected it to be. Press the center spider symbol that's on the chest, Connors said over the speakers, as if he could read his mind. Doing what the one-armed doctor suggested, Izuku pressed the spider icon, making a little clink and beeping noise, and almost instantly felt the whole thing tighten up after that noise. As expected of the material it was made of, the spandex suit was now skin-tight, hugging close to Izuku's body, a lot closer than he would have liked. I knew spandex was tight, but this is more than I expected, Izuku thought to himself with embarrassment. He looked down at himself, somewhat insecure with how the suit really showed off his physique, which he was still actually quite embarrassed and insecure about. Izuku ignored the suit's flashiness of his slim figure and began looking at the pattern that was on chest and back. The black marks on the suit went all over the chest, making a spider-like symbol that really contrasted perfectly with the green suit. On the suit it also had a small little stripe on the boots, which Izuku assumed made the bottom half of the suit less bland. The design looked somewhat futuristic, but kept a somewhat simplistic feel to it. Finishing taking in the looks of the suit, Izuku slid the mask over his face and looked towards Connors, giving him a thumbs up. Seeing the thumbs up from Izuku, Dr. Connors led in the combat droids, who immediately went after Izuku, but failed as he was dodging and hitting them back with ease. Every swing the droids made got countered and then met with a strong hit to a pressure point that had Izuku's frustration behind it. The drones didn't even last 10 minutes before they started to break apart piece by piece. Oh my, he's certainly under a lot of stress if he was able to break apart the drones with that much time, shocked at the raw speed and power he was showing against the combat drones. Dr. Connors looked at Izuku with complete intrigue as the final drone stood with its left arm gone and the right arm damaged. As the drone charged forward, its arm began making sparks come out of the palm of its hand that made Izuku's eyes widened and his breath quickened. Adrenaline began shooting through his veins as his mind forced up images of Bakugo into his head, making his teeth grit together in rage as his fist clenched tighter. For a brief moment Izuku lost himself as his mind went to black, but when his mind cleared and he felt himself, he was looking down at the combat drone which was trapped underneath him in pieces from how much damage he must have done. Finally, you stopped. You were wailing on that thing for a couple minutes. I'm glad to see you're alright now. With what sounded like a complete sigh of relief, Dr. Connors deactivated everything in the combat room so Izuku didn't have anything to set him off again. I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me. Izuku apologized once more for the mess he made, but had a small smile on his face as he finally felt relaxed. No stress. No worrying thoughts. No nothing. Izuku was finally free of his pent-up stress, and when he took off the mask, Dr. Connors could see that from the smile on his face and just sighed as he walked up to the combat room's door and opened it up for him, saying that he was glad to see Izuku smiling again. Izuku couldn't help but laugh nervously at that comment before hitting the spider symbol on his chest with the palm of his hand, making the suit loose again, allowing him to take it off. About to hand the spider suit back to Dr. Connors, Izuku kept smiling, but Connors didn't take the suit from his hands. Instead, he just walked away and began going back to his research. Dr. Connors. Questioning the Oscorp scientist's motives, Izuku walked over to the side of the doctor. It's yours, you don't have to give it back, Connors stated, not even looking away from his work. But I. Just take the suit, Izuku. Connors signed out slightly, but smiling at Izuku's cluelessness of this whole situation. Okay, thanks Dr. Connors. Izuku, as he shoved the suit in his bag before leaping up the large hole in the ceiling. That boy is clueless. Why would I give him a suit that would be pointless if he failed? Connors chuckled to himself as he kept the true factor of the exam to himself. 1 week went by after the day of the UA entrance exam, and Izuku had fortunately forgotten all about what he did in the practical exam. Yeah, right, that lasted a couple hours until he got roughly 20 text messages from Uraraka apologizing for costing Izuku points in the exam. Those messages, while making Izuku smile, made a small amount of his stress come back to him, so the nightmares of the black orb kept hunting him, and if he ever left his thoughts alone so they would wander, he would go into a blank stare at anything he was facing or holding in his hands, which is what he was doing right now, staring blankly at a piece of fish from his dinner. Izuku? Izuku sweetie? Are you feeling alright? Inko asked with concern in her voice as she looked at her dazed son. Sorry, I'm fine mom, don't worry. Clearly startled by the question, Izuku gave a half-hearted smile as he quickly ate the rest of the food on his plate before sitting down on the couch, staring blankly at the wall in front of him while he used a grip trainer for both of his hands. I failed. I only just passed the written exam, and not much needs to be said on my practical performance, Izuku thought to himself as he looked at his phone, seeing that All Might still hadn't contacted him over the entire week. He was nearly depressed. The whole week was just a seesaw of emotions for Izuku, as the nightmares and his thoughts would lead him down into a depressed state, while Momo and Uraraka lifted his spirits through their text messages. While Izuku looked at his contacts, he began thinking of what All Might now thought of him. Nothing for an entire week. He probably knows that I failed, how much I failed him. I don't even know what he saw in me to begin with. But I don't care, I did what I thought was right, I saved Yura-chan, that's all that matters. Izuku's thoughts were cut off by the sound of loud approaching footsteps as his mother burst into the room, holding what seemed to be an envelope while exclaiming, Izuku. Izuku. It's here. The letter, it's really here. No reaction. Izuku knew he failed. What was the point in getting excited if he had just screwed up his chances of getting into UA and becoming a hero? Setting aside the grip trainer, Izuku, still with a completely blank expression, walked towards his mother, thanking her before taking the letter from her hands, and walked towards his room, closing it behind him before sitting at his desk, turning on the lamp, and just stared at the letter that was between his hands. What's even the point? I know what it's going to say, with a sad sigh and his grip tightening on the sides of the letter. It's just going to say I've failed. Shouting in a fit of frustration mixed with sadness, Izuku pulled on both sides of the letter, ripping it in two, as his face remained in a tearful but frustrated expression. The loud clicking noise echoed through Izuku's head as he slowly looked down to see a small metal device landed on his desk with a small light blinking on it. But not even able to finish his sentence, the device shot up a beam of light that became a projection of All Might. Izuku shouted in disbelief as he fell backwards off his chair as the projection kept playing, while Izuku's face went from that of disbelief and shock to one of depression. Pour salt into the wound, why don't you? This is a projection. The holographic All Might exclaimed as he looked directly at the camera before taking several steps back, showing that he was on a set that looked almost like a game show. Wait, what? I thought this was from the UA questioning why he was seeing All Might on a recording device from UA. Now you're probably thinking, why is All Might on this? The answer is simple. I am in town to teach the next generation of heroes at UA High. That explanation alone made Izuku go wide-eyed as he now ignored the argument that went on between All Might and one of the cameramen telling him to get on with it. The holographic All Mights went down a little bit as he turned to the camera, now looking directly at Izuku. Midoriya, even if you just barely passed the written portion of the exam, only getting 10 points in the practical naturally results in failure. Those very words that came from the mouth of his very idol shook Izuku hard, his stress hitting him back at full force as he lowered his head so his small curly fringe covered his eyes, so he instinctively hid his eyes from the projection. I already knew, Izuku thought as tears threatened to reveal themselves and his grip on his leg tightened, almost drawing blood. But that's not the end of the story. That loud statement caught Izuku's complete attention, making him look up at the holographic All Might with tears down his face, but a small glimmer of hope in his eyes. Now then. Watch the screen. All Might exclaimed in a booming voice as he pulled a remote out of his jacket and pressed a button on it, making the screen change to what seemed like security camera footage. Izuku watched as he saw a glimpse of himself walking into the room where he revealed that he was Spider-Man. Only seconds after the door closed he saw Uraraka walk up to present Mick. "Iri-chan?" Izuku questioned as he remained quiet and watched. "She came to us almost straight after the exam," All Might explained as the video kept playing. "Excuse me, but that boy you were just with, the boy with the curly hair and freckles. His name should be Izuku Midoriya," Uraraka said with a nervous expression as she made a hand gesture that looked like she was trying to show curly hair. "Can you give him some of my points?" Uraraka said with a blush on her face and a hint of pleading in her voice. "What?" Izuku questioned in complete shock as his face softened up, but the tears that had seeped out earlier were now trying to force themselves out. "At least give him enough to pass. Please, he saved my life," Uraraka begged with a loud shout as her blush grew a little. Completely lost for words, Izuku could feel himself start to tremble as his mind started piecing everything together. All the while All Might became the focus on the screen again and pointed at Izuku with a bigger than normal beaming smile. "A hero course that rejects those who do the right thing is no hero course at all. See, we didn't just focus on villain points, rescue points were also a factor, and you young Midoriya scored 67 rescue points." All Might boomed out at the loudest Izuku had heard him, while he just looked up in shock as happy tears began to fall. "I never thought that I'd," Izuku tried to speak out but was cut off by All Might with his hand stretched out. "You've made it, young Midoriya, this will be your hero academia." Those words were the words that Izuku needed to hear for the past week, the words he thought would never be said to him since he did the exam. As the projection finished, Izuku couldn't help but yell out at the top of his lungs in happiness. His celebration was cut short though, as Izuku heard his phone go off showing that All Might had just messaged him to meet at the beach with his web filters. Izuku didn't even give it a second thought as he began running around getting his vigilante hoodie without realizing, as well as grabbing his web shooters and his vigilante web filter belt before coming out of his room seeing his mother with a smile as she heard his shout moments ago. Izuku simply smiled back, confirming her suspicion before running out of the building as fast as he could before strapping on his web shooters and leaping into the air and began swinging through the air without a single care in the world. All might have stood on the beach looking out towards the ocean waiting for Izuku to show, but when he heard the sound of a soft web splatter and the dragging sound of shoes scraping across the sand, he turned around seeing Izuku crying ridiculously. "All Might!" Shouting in what sounded like a mixed sob, Izuku ran up towards him but quickly covered his mouth as he realized All Might was in his deflated form. "Don't worry kid, it's just us here," All Might laughed as he raised his hand up with a smile saying congrats on passing kid. "Thankfully I was pretty sure I failed it." With a small nervous laugh, Izuku gave All Might a high five before going into a small bow, as if he was thanking All Might. "Lift your head up kid, everything you did was all you, not me," All Might said as Izuku raised his head up but looked confused. "But I told them I was Spider-Man, wouldn't that have meant I couldn't have been accepted into UA?" Izuku questioned as he thought he was disliked by most of the public. "Normally yes, but Principal Nedzu must have taken a liking to you, he knows my predicament and contacted me afterwards, saying that you were Spider-Man. I pretended to be surprised and he said to me, 'You must admit All Might, the boy is good. He's already got combat experience against criminals and he's made an impact on the city that can't be ignored, plus he seems like a caring young boy.'" Izuku couldn't help but be shocked at the fact that the very principal of UA High took a liking to him for all the work he's done as a vigilante. As he kept thinking about All Might and Nedzu, Izuku only just realized that he was told to bring his web filters and shooters and ask All Might why that was. Well, the answer is simple, Kid All Might began, as he took a few steps away from Izuku, making him raise an eyebrow before going into his buff form and saying a single sentence that put Izuku into a state of shock. "We are going to fight." Huh? Shouting out in pure disbelief and almost falling backwards onto his own backside, Izuku began flailing his arms frantically in front of himself while making random noises that were attempts at forming words. "What are you so nervous for, young Midoriya?" All Might boomed out with a loud laugh that echoed slightly. "Nervous? Why, you're asking me to fight you, All Might. I couldn't lay a finger on you if I tried." Yelling in protest at the absurdity of All Might's request, Izuku took a few steps back. "Why wouldn't we fight? You've grown so much in the past 10 months, I can't help but wonder how strong you've gotten." All Might boomed out with his large hands on either side of his hips as he began laughing loudly again. Still, this won't be a fair fight at all," Izuku stated in doubt as he was shaking nervously. "Come on, young Midoriya. I have faith in you." All Might shouted before quickly taking a few more steps back and stood in spot waiting, showing Izuku that there were no options left for him but to fight. One half of Izuku's brain panicked and started screaming at him that this was an awful idea that could only end horribly for him and only disappoint All Might from the massive gap in power. The other half of his brain was slowly getting louder and louder, convincing him to fight. After a few seconds, the voice overpowered his other thoughts and filled Izuku with a confidence he hadn't felt in a while. One long and deep breath was what Izuku did to calm himself as he embraced this somewhat newfound confidence. Izuku didn't say anything as he reached into his pockets and pulled out his vigilante mask and goggles before putting them on with him, finally putting up his hood with a smooth hand motion that made All Might smile at the determination and courage that Izuku had built up through his Spider-Man persona. Although he could no longer read Izuku's expression because of the face mask and goggles, All Might could tell clear as day that he was smiling as Izuku slowly crouched down into his fighting position, placing a hand on top of the sand, digging in slightly as if he was forcing something into it. All Might wasn't able to notice this as Izuku began dashing around him in strange patterns, but all ending up in some way, shape or form. Izuku placing his hands on the ground and kept repeating the cycle over and over again until eventually All Might was forced to take action and dash towards Izuku with his arm behind him ready to strike. The pulse of his spider sense went off inside of Izuku's head, warning him of the incoming strike, and responded with timing his counter movement perfectly by grabbing All Might's arm and pushed off while throwing his body weight of the bottom half of his body backwards, so he did a backflip in the air off of All Might's arm. While in the process of turning around to react to Izuku's next move, he felt 2 splatters on his shoulders, which were the result of Izuku spinning in midair and shooting 2 web lines at the 2 areas before pulling himself down hard, kicking All Might in the back with both feet. That impact made All Might realize something he should have noticed so much sooner. He was at a disadvantage. Without realizing, All Might had underestimated Izuku, his own student, when he of all people should have known the skill he had. It was obvious Izuku knew all of his moves and how he acted, and not even mentioning his spider sense, Izuku's skill was far beyond that of any normal skill, and perhaps most pro heroes. After all, he had faced villains for over 5 months, with only taking a break near to the exam. Even after all that, the boy was smarter than he'd admit to himself. Izuku was good at thinking of a plan on the fly, meaning that he never went into a fight blind, and after all his vigilante work has got him to trust his instincts, more so he was fast both mentally and physically now. Izuku was turning into something that if he kept growing, then he could possibly have no equal by the time he reached All Might's age. However, within his realization, All Might couldn't help but smile more at the disadvantage Izuku had. His movements were now extremely limited by the fact they were on a big clear sandy beach with no solid footing. With that realization now in his head, All Might swung his arm around with enough power to lift up the sand in the direction of where Izuku was landing, enveloping him in a cloud of sand and dust. Unfortunately for All Might, he was unaware of the fact Izuku's mask basically negated any attempt to make an opening due to it not affecting his breathing. Izuku charged out of the dust cloud in a single dash with his arms behind him as he stopped directly in front of All Might and threw his arms forward as All Might noticed that Izuku had webbing gripped in his hands as he only had seconds to react to as large rocks made out of sand flew over Izuku's shoulder towards All Might. As All Might raised his arms up in defense at the incoming rocks, he realized the danger and traps Izuku had set up. All of his movements weren't random at all, they were all with the intention of shoving what seemed to be quick dry webbing into the sand to make rocks. He had this planned since the beginning, All Might thought in a slight shock as the rocks crumbled against his arms when they finally made their impact. All Might just jumped high up into the air with as much power as he could muster up as he needed time to think of a quick plan. Izuku was faster than most villains he had come across, which made his pride in him grow even more. But at the same time build up his worry. Looking down at the beach, All Might realized his mistake as he saw that the shock wave from his jump had formed a large sand cloud that covered up the entire area that he and Izuku were fighting over, making him give out an annoyed sigh at the advantages Izuku was constantly making for either himself or taking advantage of. "My word, Midoriya, you are skilled." All Might laughed out from the sky as he heard a small laugh from the cloud of sand. "I did learn from the best," Izuku declared before large rocks flew out from the cloud and headed straight for All Might. Not being able to stop the laugh that was building up within him, All Might just kept laughing as he started punching and karate chopping all the rocks that flew at him with complete ease, effectively shattering all of them. Eventually the rocks stopped coming at All Might conveniently as he began to fall from the sky towards the slowly clearing sand cloud, all the while Izuku hid in said cloud as he knew stealth was his best friend right now. The moment that All Might had landed on the beach, Izuku charged forward in a single movement before leaping into the air and spinning in the air before sending a kick towards All Might's head. The hit was met with an impact, but not its intended target, as All Might had raised up his arm, so Izuku's kick hit his forearm. The two looked at each other, and although Izuku's mask was still covering his face, All Might could see clearly as day that Izuku had a bright grin on his face, which was perfect as he had the exact same grin on his face. "I haven't had this much fun in years." The two thought that at the same time, both acting like little kids, as they weren't even fighting seriously anymore, they were just throwing punches half-heartedly, with throwing the occasional surprise here and there. The first surprise move was when All Might tried to throw Izuku into the ocean, which backfired almost instantly, as when Izuku was airborne, he shot two web lines directly at All Might's chest, pulling him up into the air, while pulling himself back down to the ground. This resulted in the both of them bursting out laughing. The second surprise move was Izuku trying to trap All Might with an expanding web filter, which didn't go so well as All Might ripped the stuff to shreds with pure brute strength alone. The fight continued on like this for another 15 minutes before All Might felt like he knew how much Izuku had progressed and threw one last Detroit smash in Izuku's direction, making him fly up in the air, along with a large amount of sand. Almost as if it was muscle memory, Izuku flipped in the air and shot web lines at two base rocks he left for such an occasion, pulling him back towards the ground and to All Might as he slid across the sand in his red and white trainers before leaping out of the same cloud and threw a punch at full power, shattering his arm's bones. But it was caught by All Might's palm, which released a shock waves that forced All Might back a few feet. "Perfect, young Midoriya, you have improved so much." All Might's praise was cut short as Izuku kicked All Might in the side of the head as his right arm dangled like a limp piece of string on the side of his body. "I can still fight." Izuku gritted out in a mixture of pain and determination as he took a fighting stance, ignoring his broken arm that was already in the process of healing from the symbiote. The boy has a strong will, but there's no way he can fight with his right arm like that. Not wanting to doubt his pupil, All Might chuckled, but was shocked to see Izuku charge at him head-on and jumped in front of him and began his next assault. Izuku led with right kick to the side, which he knew would get blocked with All Might's forearm, and used the block as a distraction as left leg went straight up, making a firm impact with All Might's jaw before kicking off the buff hero's body and sliding against the sand, going back into his recovery position. All Might just began laughing uncontrollably, making Izuku raise an eyebrow before seeing a large grin on the number one hero's face. "A broken arm, and you can still lay a hit on me? Hahaha. I underestimated you, young Midoriya." All Might boomed out before deflating down to his normal look, while Izuku just lowered his hood, mask, and lifted his goggles up onto his forehead. "And I couldn't be prouder of you, Izuku." All Might smiled, holding up his left hand, which Izuku high-fived with his left hand. "I look forward to seeing you in class, kid," giving the green and black-haired boy a smile while ruffling his hair with a small laugh before taking his leave. After a thought passed by in his head, Izuku stayed on the beach and waited for his arm to heal, as he knew that his mom would have a heart attack at the sight of his arm being broken. 10 minutes had passed before Izuku felt his arm have the bones forced into place and healed together as it was before the fight, and started to make his way home in the complete darkness of night with the help of his web zipping and leaping across rooftops so he could use the cover of darkness to get home. After a few rooftops though, Izuku felt his phone vibrate and looked to see the words Yura-chan and raised an eyebrow at why she was calling him in the middle of the night. Yura-chan. Raising the phone up to his ear, he heard soft sobs coming from Uraraka. "Deku-kun, I'm so sorry. I wanted to talk to you tomorrow, but I couldn't sleep. I'm sorry I made you fail. I'm sorry I stopped you from getting into UA." In a quiet but broken voice, Uraraka sobbed into the phone, while Izuku just listened to her apologizing as he quickly leaped from rooftop to rooftop, not caring about any noise he created. As he listened to Uraraka cry over the phone with a slight pain in his chest. "You tried so hard, fought with everything you've got, and I ruined it. Yura-chan. I just had to be an idiot. I let myself get crushed, and you saved me, and now." Ira-chan. Every time you talked about heroes you had the brightest smile on your face, and now oh my god I'm so sorry Deku-kun. Ira-chan, look outside. Those 3 words stopped Uraraka crying as she finally snapped out of her little guilt trance and slowly walked over to her window and pulled the curtain hesitantly and gasped slightly when she saw Izuku hanging there upside down on a single strand of webbing with a comforting smile plastered on his face. Uraraka opened the window and was about to ask what he was doing there, but before she could do that she heard another 3 words from the green and black-haired vigilante that made her smile back at him as all guilt left her shoulders. I got in. When spring finally came around Izuku wasn't scared, anxious or anything like that, he was in fact confident. For once Izuku felt happy about his own achievements. Right now though his mother was constantly worrying and panicking that he didn't have everything he needed for his first day at UA, but he just laughed it off saying that he was fine and that he had everything he needed. Izuku's laughing stopped though when he saw the time. Mom, I've got no time, I need to hurry, Izuku said to his mother walking towards the door, but got stopped with one last call from his mother and looked back with the door half opened as Inko realized with tears stinging the corners of her eyes that her son had grown up so much over the long time he had got his spider powers. Izuku, I couldn't be prouder of you. Those words echoed in Izuku for a moment as they were almost the exact same words All Might had said to him, which just made him smile as he walked out the door with a see you later. To his mother. Izuku ran forward still looking back at his door, but ran into someone as he looked down and was surprised to see Uraraka now on the floor. Wow, Yuri-chan looks really cute in that uniform, Izuku thought to himself before ridding himself of the thought and got back to the topic at hand. Yuri-chan, what are you doing here? I thought we were going to meet at the train station, questioning the cheerful girl who was clearly out of breath from what seemed like running. Izuku helped Uraraka up before she put her hands on her knees and looked up at Izuku. The train left earlier than we thought, Uraraka said in the process of gaining her breath back. Izuku's eyes widened at the sound of that, so he quickly turned around and pointed at his back. Quickly get on. Those words made Uraraka blush furiously as she looked at Izuku, slightly unsure about this. Yuri-chan, we can't be late for the first day at UA, so get on, hold on tight, and I'll get us there in time, Izuku stated, not even considering the closeness due to how focused he was. Uraraka just looked down in embarrassment as she wrapped her arms around Izuku's neck, holding on tightly, but not too much, so she was strangling him. Izuku waited for Uraraka to get a secure hold on him before he began running forward and leaping into the air, pulling the both of them over the rooftops with a quick web zip, making Uraraka scream out of instinct. Yuri-chan, please stop screaming, it'll attract attention we don't need. Now with a small blush on his face, Izuku now felt Uraraka's chest against his back and instead tried his hardest to focus on making his way across the city. When Uraraka stopped screaming, as per Izuku's request, she actually took the time to look around. She was shocked at the speed and ease Izuku was running, leaping, and web-zipping across buildings. When she wasn't in shock from witnessing Izuku's new power, she took in her surroundings, enjoying the wind brushing against her face and flowing through her hair. Uraraka's excitement only grew as Izuku managed to get on top of a speeding train and stuck to it with his hands while Uraraka clung on for life but kept enjoying the pure adrenaline shooting through her. With only a few minutes left to spare, Izuku finally landed at the front gate of UA and looked up at the school with a feeling of pride while Uraraka got off of his back. Uraraka was about to thank Izuku, but he was already running towards the school building. Ah. Deku-kun, wait up. Uraraka shouted after him, trying to keep up with his fast speed, even though he was just jogging. As they ran through the building, Izuku kept muttering to himself the room that he, Uraraka, and Momo were all in. Come on, Yuri-chan. Not even looking back at Uraraka, Izuku reached back and grabbed her hand, making her blush again, but smiled as his touch was warm, kind, and surprisingly strong. After a few minutes of running, both teens were standing in front of a large door as Izuku tried to let go of Uraraka's hand, but she enjoyed the feeling too much and panicked a little and quickly let go of Izuku's hand while he stared at the door, praying that a certain 2 people were not in his class. Unfortunately, fate wasn't exactly the kindest person when it came to Izuku. Izuku entered the room and immediately noticed the kid with glasses and Bakugo arguing about something stupid like Bakugo's legs being on the desk, but Izuku ignored that when he saw Momo at the back of the room smiling and giving him a small wave, which he returned with a similar expression, making Uraraka pout a little. However, due to Izuku's entrance, he earned the attention of everyone, including the unwanted attention of Bakugo, who had snapped the pencil in his hand in pure rage. That bastard didn't tell me he got in. How? He's a fucking weak nobody. Bakugo was tempted to leap over his desk and strangle the life out of Izuku's face. He was beaten though, as the boy who had announced himself as Tenya Iida was marching over to Izuku with very expressive arm motions. Good morning. I am Tenya Iida. "I am Fro," Iida declared loudly before Izuku stopped him, stating that he heard him shout it earlier, making him and Uraraka sigh in relief, as his shouting was a little concerning. "Nice to meet you, I'm Izuku Midoriya," Izuku said to Iida with a slight bow, while also saying it just loud enough so the rest of the class could hear all the while. Bakugo just made a face of disgust as he made a ball of paper and threw it as hard as he could at Izuku when he bowed. That plan didn't work out so well though, as Izuku managed to instinctively catch it without even looking up, shocking those looking at Izuku, while Bakugo could feel his blood boiling at what he just saw. "Just as I thought, I underestimated you at the entrance exam. Not only that, but you figured out the hidden nature behind the entrance exam while I did not," Iida said with his head looking down as he cursed himself under his breath. "Hidden nature? Oh, the rescue points," Izuku thought in realization as he began waving off what Iida was saying. "Then no, you've got it. If you're here to socialize, then get out." A deep and bored voice spoke from behind Izuku as he just looked over his shoulder to see a man in a sleeping bag with tired eyes as he maneuvered his arm and started drinking from a juice carton. The class just went silent at that before the scruffy man stood up and got out of his sleeping bag and looked at all the students with uninterested eyes before he looked at Izuku with an unreadable expression before holding out a blue tracksuit. "Take 1, go to the changing rooms down the hall and to the left, then meet me out back. I'm also your homeroom teacher," Aizawa shouted. "Nice to meet you," Aizawa said in a bored tone, throwing a box of the tracksuits in front of them. Izuku quickly grabbed a tracksuit one size bigger than his actual size. He didn't want to show his body to people he just met and made his way to the changing rooms with Uraraka and Momo making him smile before they went off to their separate changing rooms. Izuku entered and went into the corner before taking off his grey UA jacket and tie before his spider sense flared and he felt a hand on his shoulder, turning him around before two shaking and smoking hands grabbed his shirt collar and forced him to the wall. "What the fuck are you doing here?" Bakugo shouted in pure rage with pinpoint pupils and his teeth gritting together. "I passed the exam," Izuku stated, not really feeling too threatened by Bakugo's scare tactics after the crap he's had to deal with and the wake-up call of his own hallucination. He no longer had to deal with Bakugo's shit anymore. "Don't give me that shit, you quirkless bastard. How did you pass?" The vein on Bakugo's head was sticking out in rage coursing through his very being. "That's enough. This is not how you should be treating a fellow student," Iida shouted at Bakugo, pulling him back and off of Izuku. "Wait until we get out there, you little shit. Then you'll see true power and skill," Bakugo threatened before angrily walking away and getting changed into his blue tracksuit before charging out and pushing Izuku as he exited along with 3 other students, one with spiky red hair, saying how manly Bakugo was, and a teen with blonde hair just following behind the two. "Honestly, I wish the Kachin would just die a painful death." "What?" Izuku was frozen in place from the voice that just took over his thoughts that he instantly remembered from his nightmares about the black orb. These thoughts were thankfully forced out of Izuku's head when he got a tap on the shoulder from Iida reminding him that they needed to go. Purposefully, Izuku was the last person to come out onto the training field, but that thankfully let him spot Uraraka and Momo, so he stood in between them and stayed silent as Aizawa spoke. "Today we're testing your quirks, more specifically the limits of your quirks," Aizawa spoke in a dull tone as Izuku's eyes widened and sweat appeared on his forehead from nervousness. Both Uraraka and Momo gave little sympathetic glances up to Izuku as they knew why he was nervous. "We'll be using the standard gym tests you should have done in middle school. As the test now, we'll need an example of the top scoring student from the practical." Bakugo steps forward, Aizawa stated, indicating for him to step forward, which he did with a smirk on his face, ready to turn around and rub it in Izuku's face. He was. Midoriya steps forward as well. Everyone except for Aizawa froze and had a look of shock as everyone's gaze was directed straight at Izuku, who himself was looking in shock at the information. "Deku-kun, you tied first with him?" Uraraka asked her curly-haired best friend as he slowly stepped forward, just as shocked as she was. "I guess I didn't even know myself," with a nervous expression and slightly shy demeanor as he wasn't used to all this attention to him. "As Spider-Man, yes, but not him." Izuku slowly walked over to Aizawa before hearing the most rageful growl come from Bakugo next to him before Aizawa pointed at Bakugo, stating he would be the one to demonstrate the softball throw test. Bakugo stepped forward into the circle and had the ball in hand before letting out a full power rage fueled throw with the help of his quirk, sending it flying through the air before a few seconds later, Aizawa showed on his device that he threw it 754.3 meters. "If you believe that this will be all fun and games, then you are dead wrong. The person who does the worst, or I believe holds no talent, will be expelled from UA." That statement made everyone go wide-eyed and a bit fearful, but Momo leaned up a little to the right so she could whisper in Izuku's ear. Let's just hope this is only a scare tactic to get us motivated, Momo whispered to Izuku, who was currently frozen on the spot with his face completely red because, without realizing, when she leaned over to whisper, she had unintentionally put Izuku's arms between her upai slightly. Momo raised an eyebrow at first seeing Izuku's reaction, but when the realization hit her she backed away, so she was back to standing next to him, with a small blush tinted on her face while smiling a little. Uraraka on the other hand had a small pout while crossing her arms making a small huff, slightly irritated by the scene. Okay, first event 50-meter dash Aizawa stated while walking towards a 50-meter track. How exactly are you going to hide your big powers, Deku-kun? You're on everyone's radar now, Uraraka asked Izuku in a quiet tone, purposely doing what Momo did earlier, making the roles reverse, as Momo huffed a little in response. I'll just not use my webs, Izuku said in a quiet, nervous and embarrassed tone, quickly moving forward a little faster. Uraraka giggled at Izuku's nervousness before she looked to Momo, who was giving her a slight glare which she of course returned back before running up to their curly-haired crush as they watched people go up to the beginning of the track where Ida and a girl with frog-like features. Izuku could feel his heart accelerate in fear as he remembered back to the hostage situation in downtown. He had saved that girl and her family. He'd be spotted in an instant if he used his spider powers around her. Now panicking slightly, Izuku quickly looked around at the other students to see if anyone else he recognized was there. And sure enough there was. Behind Izuku, talking to a girl with long earlobes in the shape of earphone jacks, was an extremely excited and cheerful girl with pink hair and skin with little horns poking out of her hair. It was the very first person he had saved, as Spider-Man. Now in a complete panic, Izuku knew that him being found out was very strong at this point, but he was still determined to keep his identity safe from them all. However, all his panicking made him zone out and forget about the quirk test going on. Midoriya, Bakugo, you're up, Aizawa called out, as well he didn't really care about these tests, but was interested to see the power gap between that of a vigilante and a hero in training. Izuku jolted at the sound of his name being called and walked up to the track nervous and shaking a little, as Bakugo was next to him with his eyes covered by his low-hanging spiky hair, but Izuku could still feel the rage coming off of him. The strange thing was that Izuku had never felt Bakugo be so angry at him before, which almost scared him. Ready? Go. At the sound of go, Izuku began running with about a tenth of his power without one for all, so that he was running next to Bakugo with ease, but not even a single second passed, but already Izuku felt his spider sense flare up and saw Bakugo ready to raise up his hands, so he reacted instinctively with a boost of speed so that he wasn't caught in the blast. Crap. Wait, I need to SL. 3.0 seconds. The very blood that ran through Izuku's veins went cold as ice as those two words sank in, making him realize he had screwed up. No, he had fucked up so bad. Wow. He beat my time. I truly underestimated you, Midoriya-kun. That wasn't pretty at all. That was manly as hell. Oh no. Momo and Uraraka said that last comment in unison, as they knew Izuku didn't plan on doing that, but they had a feeling he was already beating himself up about this, but they couldn't say anything to him, as Bakugo had grabbed his collar again, teeth gritting in pure rage. Who are you? You aren't Deku. Deku is weak, pathetic, and a piece of shit. You can't be Deku. Bakugo shouted, throwing Izuku back, trying to throw him to the ground, but thanks to Izuku coordination, he landed on his feet with his head down slightly, so his curly fringe covered his eyes, and just walked away from Bakugo, making him livid as he started to produce small explosions in his right palm. But several bits of cloth wrapped around him, preventing him from moving even an inch. You get beat, get over yourself, pull that stunt again, and you're the one getting expelled. Aizawa threatened before letting him go and leading the rest of the students to the next test, which was grip strength. As much as they wanted to go over and support Izuku and help him stop hating himself for using his enhanced strength and speed, but Momo and Uraraka knew that they couldn't help him deal with it, so they walked with each other as he just walked ahead all alone. The grip strength test was a little better for Izuku, as he could control the amount of enhanced strength he used, but even then his held back power was still 400 kg, making him stand out a little more, as the only person who got higher was the tall boy with 3 arm-type tentacles. Izuku didn't care that much though, as his excitement began to fade due to him knowing the increasing amount of risks even showing his power. The third event, which was a standing long jump, led to Izuku doing fairly average, as due to his holding back, he got it directly in the middle score, beating most of the other students, making him a little happier and emotionally stable enough to hang around with Momo and Uraraka, which made them happy to see him returning to normal. The fourth event only increased Izuku's mood. This plan didn't work at all when he was about to step up to take his turn for the softball throw, but Aizawa called him aside and told the next person to take his place. Izuku's heart was beating at an insane pace as he stood in front of Aizawa waiting for him to speak. Midoriya cares to explain to me why you are holding back your power. I saw your performance at the entrance exam you're holding back. This is meant to test the limits of your quirk, and the fact you don't want to even do that is insulting, not to me, but for what UA stands for. Izawa's tone was a little hostile, as the cloth around his neck threatened to attack Izuku. But let him see the yellow goggles around his neck. Bares her head. I'm sorry, but I don't want to reveal who I am to them, Izuku explained, looking down. You're with these people for 3 years, you've got to learn to trust them with that fact, and besides we at UA have agreed to keep your identity secret, and the students if they were to find out, would be forced to keep quiet about it. Izawa started with an annoyed sigh, almost as if he didn't agree with it. Thanks to Izawa-sensei, I won't hold back anymore. Izuku started with a little bit of determination, but got cut off again. No, you're redoing everything with your full power. You didn't want people to notice you, so as punishment you're going to give it your all in front of everyone. Well, his blood ran cold as ice. Izuku paled at what Izawa was telling him, as he knew he was as good as done for if he did that. And if you refuse, say goodbye to your place here at UA. Izuku remained completely silent at that, as he knew he had no way out of this, so he just watched everyone else do their quirk tests while he was forced to stand next to Izawa, but did use the opportunity to think of a way he could incorporate one for all into his tests. It would be impossible to use it without breaking my bones completely, so wait, all this time I've been using one for all in one section of my body, and that's it. What if I used it across my entire body for a brief moment? The power would spread, and the use of it only being less than a second wouldn't break my bones. Raising his hand triumphantly, Izuku mentally celebrated his plan, but stopped and looked incredibly embarrassed when he saw all the other Class A students in front of him, asking why he hadn't done any of the other tests. Midoriya here was holding back and not being honest with his power to you all. I made sure that you got to see what he was capable of seeing, as he got to see the limits you all have. Izawa stated boredly as he reached into his pocket and started to use eye drops on his red eyes. You bastard. You were, Bakugo shouted in pure fiery fury, but stopped when he saw Izawa glaring at him. Now Midoriya, you're up, and remember, don't hold back. A gulp could be heard from Izuku as he saw Izawa glare at him while he slowly walked towards the beginning of the sprinting track, while all the students looked somewhat interested to see what Izuku's best was. You there? You seem to know Midoriya-kun very well. How Poita shouted at both Momo and Uraraka, but both of them cut him off. Stop shouting. Both of them shouted back at him. My apologies. As I was saying, do either of you know how strong Midoriya-kun is? Iida asked them while Bakugo listened with anger, as he wanted to know the answer to this sudden appearance of power from Izuku, while the curly-haired teen himself was readying up to sprint with them instead of think of saving Yuri-chan, just like at the entrance exam, only for a moment. Ready? Go. For only a single moment Izuku used one for all to make his start off have no slow start, so he could go straight into a sprint, which for him was a ridiculous speed that shocked everyone including Izawa, as Izuku crossed the line and scraped along the rough ground to slow down his momentum, and unintentionally looked cool while doing it, as the device at the end of the track spoke. 1.49 seconds. Everyone was speechless at what they had just witnessed, even Izawa himself had dropped the device in his hand at the time Izuku scored, as he looked away with a completely red face, as he was completely embarrassed by all the looks in his direction. Izawa quickly recovered from his shock and just told him to do the grip strength test and handed him the machine, which he gripped with as much strength he could muster with a little flash in his head of the entrance exam, used one for all for less than a moment, but that was more than enough to smash the machine into little pieces. Whoa, this Midoriya kid is a monster. A kid with spiky red hair shouted out at what the curly-haired teen did by accident. This continued for all the other events. Sidestepping, he got the highest due to repeatedly turning on one for all, with every sidestep, which was really risky on Izuku's end, as just as the time was about to run out, Izuku could feel his bones on the brink of shattering. Seated toe touching was also extremely easy due to the amount of flexibility and abdominal strength Izuku had gained through his powers and training, not to mention when upper body training came around, Izuku won without question. The softball throw was the second to last test for Izuku, as he also decided to use one for all in only his right index finger, but in the process of doing so, the backlash blew back all the students from the impact, while the ball itself landed 2,037.3 meters ahead, shocking everyone at pure power, contained within what they thought was Izuku's scrawny body. That was an amazing Deku-kun. Both Momo and Uraraka cheered at Izuku as he held his broken index finger with a slightly strained face, but didn't mind as the pain was already easing due to all his healing abilities being focused solely on his finger. Amazing Midoriya-kun has amazing power. I'd say he's a truly talented individual. I completely misjudged him, Iida said to himself with rather unnecessary hand motions, but everybody around him didn't really care. Bakugo on the other hand was in shock and still filled with rage as his knuckles were completely white from how tightly his fist was clenched so hard. This isn't right. Deku was a bug like the rest of them. A bug in my path. As Bakugo kept denying everything he was seeing about Izuku, Aizawa announced that class was dismissed after showing the leaderboard to them all, showing that Izuku was on the top, even without him doing the endurance running with Momo just underneath him. Aizawa had given up making Izuku do the running, as he knew they'd be there all day if they had to wait for Izuku to get tired. As soon as Izuku heard class dismissed, he ran at full sprint into the changing room before quickly changing back into his uniform and running into the school so he could avoid the bombardment of questions, as he wasn't ready for that at all, so he decided to wait it out as the final bell for the day went, so he went out to the front gate and waited for Momo and Uraraka while thinking to himself, please don't let tomorrow be any worse than it was today. Unfortunately, fate, as we well know, wasn't too favorable on Izuku, as tomorrow he was going to have a fight that would change him either for better or for the worse. After such a bad first day, Izuku needed something, anything, to make him feel better, so he waited by the front gate and thanked the stars as Uraraka and Momo were the first two to exit UA after him. They had worried expressions on their faces while he returned a half-hearted smile, giving them the illusion that he was fine. Hey Momo-chan, Yura-chan, sorry about running off like that, Izuku apologized, but the two of them just looked at him in shock at what he was saying. You're kidding me, right Deku-kun? Momo questioned. You had every right to run, you got called out as top in the exam and forced to show your power, which, by the way, was amazing. Uraraka exclaimed in pure awe while Izuku blushed at the comment. That time you got for the dash made even Aizawa-sensei drop his score tracker. Momo added, making Izuku's blush an even deeper red. I didn't see that. Izuku stuttered in embarrassment, instinctively covering his face as he and the other two girls started to walk away from UA. However, they didn't even take 3 steps before someone dashed in front of them and bowed heavily to Izuku. Midoriya-kun. Iida began shouting, but saw the girls glare. My apologies Midoriya-kun, I would be honored if you would train with me. Your speed, it was something I had never seen before. He asked Izuku with his arms pointing to himself and to Izuku. Sure, are Sundays okay? Izuku asked nervously, but was a little surprised to see Iida handing him a piece of paper with a phone number on it. Of course. Whatever works for you. That was only said to Izuku before Iida ran off in a quick dash, leaving the 3 other teens in a confused silence. Are we gonna talk about what just happened? Uraraka questioned, still a little confused. Momo and Izuku just shook their heads with blank expressions. The 3 looked at each other silently before bursting out in pure laughter as they slowly walked away from UA again, Izuku in the process of forgetting the awful day he had just dealt with. Fortunately, it did get a hell of a lot better when he felt Momo jump onto his back and wrap her arms around his neck like Uraraka did earlier that same day. Momo-chan, Izuku stuttered out with a bright red blush, making the 2 girls giggle before Momo gave a playful smirk to Izuku. I heard all about the lift you gave Yura-chan this morning. Deku-kun, you never let me ride on your back while you swing around, Momo said to the curly-haired teen, while Uraraka just kept giggling with her hand over her mouth to stop it from turning into laughter. We were in a rush. I had no choice. Still stuttering like a nervous fool, Izuku's face turned an even darker shade of red. Well, I want to ride, too. Yura-chan doesn't mind. Uraraka gave a subtle but soft glare to Momo, but said it was fine and began to walk away from the 2 now laughing out loud. Come on horsey, giddy up. Momo smirked with a slight jump on his back. All the while, Izuku's head was as red as a tomato and steaming like a kettle. Izuku knew this wasn't gonna get any better, so he did a quick run up before leaping into the air and beginning to web swing high up through all the tall skyscrapers, making sure to do the occasional flipper fancy maneuver to make Momo scream or laugh in excitement. She even undid her ponytail so that all the rushing winds could flow through her hair with ease. After a lot of swinging and 30 minutes worth of detours, Izuku landed on the roof of Momo's apartment building and helped Momo off his back as she was still laughing like crazy with tears in her eyes. Momo-chan, PFFT, calm down. Izuku said to her, starting to laugh at himself. They both tried to cover their mouths and stop laughing, but one looked at each other and they began laughing so hard that Momo ended up falling on the ground clutching her stomach while Izuku struggled to stay on his own 2 feet and keep his mouth covered. Finally, after several long minutes of laughter, Momo had calmed down enough for Izuku to offer her a hand, which she took with a smile. However, due to Izuku still giggling so much, he used just a little too much strength when pulling her up and she slammed against his chest, making her blush, while Izuku himself was back to being as red as a tomato. Momo looked up at Izuku with an embarrassed expression, but decided not to move away, as not only did Izuku's warm body make him extremely comfortable for her, but she also knew she wouldn't get a chance like this again anytime soon, so she wanted to see if this went anywhere. Izuku's heart was beating 100 miles an hour, as he had no clue what to do, but his body, possibly the very blood pumping through his veins, was almost urging not forcing him forward. Momo was a little shocked that he was the one moving forward, but she felt excited and moved her own head up slowly, closing her eyes, waiting for what she wanted for the last 3 months. The Momo, this mood was perfect. They had known each other for roughly 5, almost 6 months now. They were extremely close friends, who they both trusted dearly. Even the position they were in, intimate with Momo's hands on Izuku's almost rock-hard chest, while his hands were hovering just around her voluptuous hips. The two teens' lips were almost an inch apart from each other, with Izuku's right hand now moved up onto Momo's left cheek, urging her forward before they finally got interrupted by Izuku's phone ringing, ruining the entire mood and making Momo internally scream in anger. She was very tempted to just grab his collar and pull the green-haired teen into a kiss. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to do that as Izuku had stepped back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, answering it to hear his mother talking to him. "Hi mom, yeah, I'm with Momo-chan right now. Yeah, I'll come home okay, I love you too, mom, okay, bye," Izuku said quietly over the phone while looking away from Momo, as he was still incredibly embarrassed. "So I'm just gonna go," Izuku to Momo while walking towards the edge of the building. "Yeah, thanks for the lift and everything. I'll see you in class." Deku-kun. Momo smiled while still blushing at what almost happened. "Yeah, see you Momo-chan," Izuku smiled before leaping off the building and swinging off. "Oh my god. I almost kissed him. I almost kissed him." It had just gone past 7 at night and Izuku still couldn't get over what had happened. He was begging for something to take his mind off his situation with Momo and thanked his stars when Connors texted him saying that he had a new set of web shooters for Izuku, as well as some information regarding another Oscrip scientist. Izuku quickly grabbed his vigilante outfit and a new little device he had been working on, putting the device's earpiece into his ear before trailing the wire down to the device now attached to his hoodie that played radio transmission into his right ear. Pulling up his mask and lowering his goggles, Izuku quickly made his way towards Connor's lab in the dark of the night. He almost relaxed as the breeze flowed into his hood and swirled around, making his hair flow around, which he never got sick of. Landing in Connor's lab like he usually did, Izuku greeted the scientist before removing his mask and goggles, resting them around his neck. "As promised, here's your updated web shooters, which can now mix up to 3 different types of web filters at once. Speaking of which, here is a refill on all your web filters and several new ones." Connors smiled, handing Izuku a backpack full of web filters. "Thank you, Dr. Connors, this is amazing. I have to ask though, were you able to make the fireproof webbing?" Izuku asked in curiosity, as he knew that webbing wasn't exactly suited for going against Bakugo's quirk. "Of course. Oh, and I meant to tell you, I also made another discovery with the symbiote," Connors stated as he began walking towards a cabinet and opened it up to reveal countless vials, all labeled and full of black liquid. "Wait, is that all my blood?" Izuku asked, his eyes as wide as saucers. Looking closer, he noticed that every single vial was shaking, trying to move towards him. "Well, when I was working with the symbiote cells, I found that they possessed a strong weakness to high-frequency sound and fire. Using electrical stimulation to make the cells multiply, I increased the size of my symbiote sample so that I had enough cells to work with to achieve 100% accurate results. I just recently made a sample that's capable of being resistant to both of those things." Now reaching for the most recent vial and a syringe on a tray next to his desk, Dr. Connors drained the liquid into the syringe and began walking towards Izuku. "Theoretically, by injecting this specific vial of modified symbiote into your body's bloodstream, you should be less affected by fire and sound-based quirks," the scientist stated, while Izuku just looked with hesitation at the syringe. "Dr. Connors, I know how you've told me this symbiote is helping me, but I feel a bit unsure about this," Izuku confessed, but was rolling up his sleeve anyway, because part of his mind was telling him he needed this. Finally agreeing with himself that this was for the best, Izuku stuck his left arm out for Dr. Connors. Dr. Connors grabbed a disinfectant wipe from that same tray and carefully cleaned the inner side of Izuku's elbow before reading the needle against the skin. As the needle was inserted, Izuku could feel it slowly pierce and slide through his skin, followed by Connors injecting the symbiote directly into Izuku's bloodstream. Izuku flinched as he could feel it wriggling around in his arm, but when it began heading towards his chest, that flinch evolved into a shudder. When the injection was finally done, Izuku thanked Dr. Connors with a half-hearted smile while he rubbed the sore spot on his arm. Suddenly remembering something, Connors told Izuku about how Dr. Otto Octavius would be coming to Tokyo to show off a new potential energy source for the entire city. Really, wow, I can't wait to meet him, Izuku said, smiling excitedly. Don't worry about that, we're going to see the presentation this weekend, and you can bring a guest with you, as well. Just make sure you're both well dressed, Connors stated, putting away the equipment he had just used before pulling out a notepad. Now, just as precaution, I'm going to have to record any symptoms you could be experiencing, Connors stated before sitting down in his work chair. He began writing a description of how Izuku felt, which went along the lines of momentary wriggles in his arm, slight tiredness, bursts of energy when he wasn't tired, and itchiness. Well, for the time being, get some rest and come back tomorrow. We'll see if there are any changes then. Now putting away his notepad, Connors watched as Izuku sorted out his vigilante outfit before waving off the scientist and leaping up the hole in the ceiling, making his way to the roof. Once Izuku got on the roof, he was about to leap off and begin making his way home, but in the corner of his eye he saw something suspicious. The window on the top floor of a skyscraper had been cut open in a circle, indicating to him that it had obviously been broken into, which was odd to him, as he heard nothing about a break-in on his earpiece. Quickly web swinging over to the building and making it through the hole in the window without any noise or loss of speed, Izuku looked around the dark building to see not a person in sight across the highly expensive building. Izuku quietly made his way through until he reached a set of office doors that had been locked by someone before entering the office. The second Izuku entered the office, he felt his spider sense flare up. Reacting from the slight movement he heard to his left, he grabbed the incoming hand heading straight for his face before pushing it away and doing a quick combat flip backwards so he could go straight into a fighting stance, while also making sure he was looking straight forward to see the perpetrator. Izuku's eyes widened behind his goggles as he saw a slender young girl with pure white hair in her mid-teens standing before him wearing a black latex bodysuit with white fur around the wrists, ankles, and collar. The suit was designed in such a way that it purposely showed off cleavage, revealing to Izuku a bust that rivaled Momo's. To hide a very small percentage of her face, the thief had a black mask around her eyes with a small glass layer over the eye holes, seeming to be some form of protection or serve some other purpose that was unknown to him. I had a feeling it was you, bug boy. After all, I know I didn't trip any alarms, the white-haired thief said in a soft yet incredibly flirtatious tone to Izuku, who took no notice of it as he spoke in his vigilante voice. Put back what you stole, and I'll take you in quietly without use of force, Izuku threatened her, noticing that a safe on the wall behind what seemed to be a desk had been broken into. I mean, come on, a girl's gotta eat, the thief started with a playfully pouty face as she began to walk out the door of the office. Izuku immediately charged at her with his left arm forward, firing a web line at her back to pull her backwards, but she was able to react quick enough to spin while moving to the left to avoid it, pouncing forward at Izuku with what seemed to be claw-like nails. Thinking ahead several steps, Izuku's right arm was already down low to the floor aiming towards the thief. Firing a web line at her stomach, he grabbed hold of the web and pulled on it hard, making her slam down to the ground and knocking the wind out of her. While gritting her teeth with a smirk on her face, the thief pushed off the floor and ran towards the window she entered through, but she was no match for Izuku as he effortlessly caught up with her and grabbed her wrists, forcing her against the window. Nowhere to go now. I'm turning you in, Izuku stated as he forced her wrists above her head before using his webbing to bind them together. This only made her smirk grow a little more as when she had an opening, the thief forced her arms down so that they were around Izuku's neck while she brought herself closer to him. What they said about you was true. You really are as good as they come, sorry bug boy, but this black cat doesn't belong in a cage, the thief said in her flirty tone before leaning forward and pressing her lips against Izuku's mask, making him go completely wide-eyed in shock as his mind started to spiral out of control. The distraction the thief made worked perfectly as she was able to cut herself free of the webbing before pushing Izuku back and jumping out of the window without a single sign of hesitation. Izuku didn't run after her like he normally would, but instead stood still in a daze. Mind boggled at the very fact this thief tried to kiss him to escape, Izuku sat there for another minute or two before regaining enough composure to exit the building. He contacted the police to report the situation to them before heading home, making sure to convince himself that his first kiss wasn't that, thinking that it didn't count due to his mask being in the way. When Izuku snuck back into his room through the window, he wasted no time at all in throwing off his clothes and sliding into bed in hopes of ridding his mind of that black cat. After a few hours of sleep, Izuku was expecting to feel the warmth of his own bed, but was instead met with the white void plaguing his dreams. He looked around, expecting to see the black orb, but it was nowhere to be seen within the thick endless sea of white. Please. Izuku's spine jolted at the voice that rang in his ears, making him turn around to see a humanoid-shaped lump of black liquid on the floor of the void. Help. The curly-haired teen's eyes widened in shock looking at the figure and stepped forward ready to help it, but as he stepped closer, the figure became more human-like in appearance. When Izuku kneeled down in front of the humanoid-looking figure and helped it up, he was shocked to come face to face with himself, just with darkened green eyes that were almost black. This other form of Izuku didn't even have his curly green hair. Instead, it was more black than green, while being straight rather than curly, making his hair seem so much longer compared to Izuku's own curly hair. "Please help me." Izuku was horrified to see what looked to be himself grab his shirt, shouting that plea with tears streaming down his face, as if he was in incredible pain, before slowly melting away into the black liquid. This scared Izuku beyond horror, as he could only scream in fear while watching himself melt away. The liquid began to climb Izuku's body, clinging tightly to him, as he tried to get it off him. It became a fruitless effort as it got closer and closer to his face before consuming his head, surrounding him in darkness. The instant the darkness had consumed Izuku, he jolted straight up in his bed in a cold sweat, panting heavily while his body was shaking in fear. Not even mentally prepared to question what happened, Izuku instead just moved his knees up to his chest and hugged them for a good 10 minutes. He looked at the time to see it had just gone past 5 o'clock in the morning and decided that after such a nightmare, he would just go out and train down at the beach. He grabbed one of his vests and a pair of baggy pants before slipping into them and quietly going into the kitchen with his phone and earphones in hand. Grabbing 2 breakfast bars for his breakfast, Izuku left, going out for a jog to the beach. With an almost emotionless expression and not a single thought going through his head, he ran to the beach as music played into ears, feeling the cool breeze of the early morning darkness. When he finally arrived at the beach, Izuku remembered that today was his focus on gymnastics and strength work, so he began doing stretches to loosen up his muscles to make training easier. After finishing up his stretches, Izuku lowered his left leg that he'd had straight up in the air, almost like he was doing a yoga position, before walking up towards the edge of the ocean and breathing in a focused stance with his right arm reeled back. "Okay, so let's see what One for All can do," Izuku thought to himself while preparing to use the technique that he used yesterday at UA. With a glint of determination, Izuku's grip became a lot tighter on his right hand as he threw a powerful punch towards the ocean, making him slide back in the sand, with his bones aching from One for All being used for just a little longer than yesterday. When Izuku looked forward though, he was almost in shock to see the ocean was split as far as the eye could see, with the split itself being roughly 20 meters wide. "Wow, I guess I had more power than I thought." With a nervous laugh, Izuku watched as the 2 split parts of the ocean came crashing together. "I can't use this kind of power on a person. It might be best if I just stick with my enhanced attributes," Izuku said to himself as he thought about his spider powers and how he wanted to try and hide his identity. "You're with these people for 3 years. You've got to learn to trust them." Those words from Izawa rattled about in Izuku's head for a moment, stopping his train of thought, and he looked at his open right hand before clenching it and gaining a look of confidence on his face. "No, Izawa-sensei is right, I have to trust them even if it means revealing my identity," Izuku said to himself before practicing his fighting style with a flurry of punches and kicks, assessing the speed and agility of his movements. Even after an hour, every movement Izuku made caused a small amount of sand to be lifted from the ground. As he had shed his vest very early on, the sweat that had accumulated on his bare upper body due to his vigorous training glistened in the early morning light. "I need to be faster," Izuku said with a serious expression. He was now pushing his body to its limits, using his enhanced strength and speed to make his movements flow faster than the waves a few feet away from him. Faster now on both hands, Izuku started spinning on the spot with his hands, all the while his legs spun around in an almost helicopter-like fashion, making the sand rise in a circular pattern around him. Faster pushing off from his hands, Izuku pointed his legs straight up and maneuvered himself to be upright in the air. He then began to repeatedly punch and kick the air before landing on his feet with uneven breaths. Before the curly-haired teen could do anything else, he heard his phone alarm go off, telling him that he should head home and start getting ready for school. Izuku landed near the street harboring the entrance to UA as he noticed a few press reporters near the front gate, then proceeding to walk towards the front gate. Straightening out her hair after getting a ride, courtesy of Izuku, Uraraka smiled at Izuku and thanked him. "Thanks again, Deku-kun, you're really a lifesaver, Deku-kun." Uraraka noticed that he seemed distracted, almost zoned out. "Oh, yeah, you're welcome," Izuku responded after a small jolt back into reality. He continued towards UA's front entrance with his head hung slightly, walking with Uraraka into the building. Shortly after they entered their classroom, Izuku's eyes instantly met with Momo's, making his face redden, while a blush formed on hers. "Okay, everyone, take your seats. Regular lessons will start as normal." Izawa started with a tired, grumbling voice before he laid back on the floor in his yellow sleeping bag. Everyone, apart from Izuku, Iida, and Momo, groaned in annoyance that they had to do normal curriculum lessons, such as English and mathematics. When lunch came around, Izuku couldn't do anything but geek out when he discovered that all of UA's lunches were cooked and provided by the Food Hero Lunch Rush. So many things to pick from. I guess I'll have the white rice. Izuku smiled, making Lunch Rush chuckle, as he stated that it was a good choice, as it was his specialty. As soon as Izuku sat down on a free empty table, he was immediately met with Iida and Uraraka sitting down on his right and left respectively. It didn't stop there, though, as sat on the other side of Uraraka was the frog-like girl, while opposite Izuku was Momo, the pink-haired girl, what seemed to be an invisible girl, and the girl with long earphone-like earlobes. While Midoriya is already getting along with girls, Kirishima laughed from a table over with the rest of the 1A boys. I'm so jealous. Just one little peek, and he'd see up there, Mineta exclaimed with large eyes and a small nosebleed before he was hit on the head by Zero. Dude, have a little decency, Zero said to the short bubble-haired pervert. I swear I'm going to murder that bastard. Bakugo gritted his teeth in anger as he kept glaring at Izuku, fury filling his eyes as he kept thinking of the events of the day before. He's been holding back a quirk this whole time. He's been mocking me. That can't be forgiven. Bakugo shouted while slamming his fist down onto the table. After lunch, everyone in Class 1A sat in their seats excitedly waiting for their basic hero training, hoping that their teacher was actually. I have. Everyone's eyes brightened a little as they heard the deep booming voice of the number 1 hero. Come through the door like a normal person. Without a doubt being the most over-exaggerated entrance ever, All Might burst through the door in his Silver Age costume before he began posing in front of the class. Basic hero training. The class that'll put you through all sorts of special training to mold you into heroes. Now, today's activity is battle training. As All Might yelled that out and presented a card marked battle, Izuku's face paled while Bakugo's gained a massive smirk. Izuku could already feel his heart pumping as he watched All Might talk about everyone else's hero costumes that came out of a hidden compartment in the wall. While everyone else was grabbing their suits and almost running to the changing rooms, Izuku sat in his seat while clutching his bag tightly. Come on, my boy, I can guarantee you that your identity will not leave this school, All Might said while putting his right hand on Izuku's shoulder, his left giving a large thumbs up. Izuku's spirits were lifted with that, so he finally got up and went to the changing rooms. Seeing that all the guys were almost done changing, Izuku just waited until Iida, the last person, left, then pulled out his green and black spider suit. Slipping into the suit like it was nothing, Izuku was about to press the symbol on the suit's chest, but stopped short. He grabbed his mask and put it on before opening the door and walking towards the exit in his currently loose suit, full of nervousness. Standing closest to the exit, Uraraka noticed Izuku enter and had to smile a little. Deku-kun, I think your suit is a little loose, Uraraka said, as she giggled with a hand in front of her mouth, but that giggle quickly turned into a gasp when Izuku pressed the symbol, making the little clunk noise as his suit tightened to fit his body perfectly. Uraraka could only look with a shocked and embarrassed expression as a large blush washed over her face. Momo's attention was caught by Uraraka's gasp and had a little one of her own as a small smirk and blush appeared on her face. I'm so glad I convinced him to get the spandex suit, Momo thought as her eyes trailed up and down Izuku's muscular and incredibly lean body while everyone else started to notice Izuku. Holy crap. Midoriya is ripped. Truly an elegant suit. Midoriya-kun. That is a spectacular suit. Hearing all the compliments, Izuku was bright red behind his mask as they all turned back to face All Might. Deku-kun, that suit looks amazing. I wish I had been more specific with mine. It's so tight and curvy, Uraraka said, scratching the back of her head in nervousness while Izuku looked on in embarrassment at her curvy figure. Oh my god, Izuku thought before Uraraka continued. I guess I should have started to not be skin tight. That was a lie. Uraraka stated that she wanted her suit to be that tight because she wanted a little bit more attention from Izuku. She knew that she didn't have a figure like Momo, but she was still proud of it enough to try and get a little attention. Being in the hero course is the best. Mineta said to Izuku with a slight nosebleed and thumbs up, but was met with a hard punch to the face from Izuku's right arm. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that, I swear. Izuku shouted apologetically as he moved up his mask so his mouth was visible. Ow. Did I just get hit by a car? Mineta yelled while holding his face with tears stinging the corners of his eyes. What was that? I didn't even feel my arm move. Everyone's attention was quickly lost from the accidental punch to Mineta's face as All Might explained the training situation and the teams that everyone would be in. Nice. It must be fate if we're together. Uraraka said excitedly while Izuku just laughed nervously behind his mask with a bright red blush. Well, Uraraka said that though, she looked over at Momo and smirked at her. Momo responded by sticking out her tongue, not really caring if it seemed a bit childish. Moving on. The first two teams are Team A as the heroes and Team D as the villains. As All Might called that out, Bakugo gained a massive smirk while Izuku just gulped in fear. Villains are the first to enter with the heroes entering in 5 minutes. Good luck. All Might boomed before handing Izuku and Uraraka a layout of the building. All Might instructed both Iida and Bakugo to adopt villain-like personas for the exercise. All Might, are we allowed to prepare outside the building and do what we want? All Might nodded at that before adding that they could do whatever preparation they needed so long as it wasn't inside the building. After he said that, the rest of the students went to an observation area while the two teams were left where they were. Izuku nodded at that and, as soon as the other team entered the building, he leapt into the air and began covering all the windows with his webbing before landing back down next to Uraraka. Izuku stated as he reached behind him to the biggest pouch in his suit and pulled out his vigilante goggles, handing them to Uraraka. It's gonna be dark in there, so you're gonna need these to see. Izuku's logic made sense to Uraraka as he held the blueprint of the building against the wall, then stuck it with 4 web shots. Okay, so we'll want to avoid conflict as much as possible. Kakin will be the biggest threat out of the two of them, Izuku explained as he marked with webbing where he saw the target while he was covering all the windows. Oh yeah, he was the one who bullied you, Uraraka said with a sad expression. He may be a jerk, but he's amazing. His goals, his confidence, even his quirk. He's stronger than me, and that's why I want to prove him wrong. Izuku started with a serious expression, moving his mask down to cover his mouth. He must be joking. Wait, is Deku-kun really that insecure about his own strength? Just what did Bakugo do to him? Uraraka thought with a sympathetic look. Meanwhile, at the observation basement, All Might already had a notepad out because he was giving marks and taking away marks from what he was seeing from both teams. Midoriya, my boy, you have the advantage over everyone here from your months of experience, but that might also give you away, All Might thought as he heard Mina speak behind him. Is it just me, or does that thing on Midoriya-kun's chest look like a spider? Oh shit. The second both Izuku and Uraraka entered the building, Uraraka noticed something about Izuku that felt different. His posture was confident, his shoulders were pushed out looking broader than normal, even his very presence felt reassuring and comforting. Yes, this is what he's like, as Spider-Man. We've got this in the bag, Uraraka thought with a big confident smile. As both Izuku and Uraraka made their way through the dark building, Izuku kept thinking of scenarios for if they ran into Bakugo, but the best one resulted in him adding the fireproof filter on both wrists, with the addition of expanding web and quick dry webbing onto his left wrist. When the two of them were about to turn a corner in the pitch black halls, Izuku's spider sense flared like crazy, so he quickly wrapped his arm around Uraraka and jumped back to see Bakugo looking around the halls frantically. Where are you? I know you're here, you bastard. Bakugo yelled in rage, trying to light up the halls with small explosions in his hands. Izuku quickly signaled Uraraka to carry on while he dealt with Bakugo. While Uraraka went around the incoming conflict, Izuku fired a web shot down the hall opposite to him, drawing Bakugo's attention, while Izuku walked towards him with a light step. Everyone watched in anticipation as Izuku inched closer to the fuming teen. He reeled his right arm back, and the second Bakugo turned enough, he sent his fist flying towards Bakugo's jaw, making a powerful impact. Everyone looked in shock and awe at the hard punch that sent Bakugo straight to the floor. You bastard. Bakugo yelled in rage, pointing his hand forward and making an explosion to light up the area in front of him, but he saw nothing, making him even angrier. Izuku just kept using the shadows to his advantage as he kept hiding, then sneaking close before hitting Bakugo and firing a small web shot at his joints, slowing the rage-fueled blonde down with every shot. This continued for a full minute until Bakugo's rage reached another level. He screamed out in anger before pointing his grenade-looking gauntlet down the corridor Izuku was at and pulled the pin while yelling. Fuck you. 3 floors above, Uraraka had been trying to sneak around and catch the objective, but due to her boots having heels on them, that failed miserably. However, due to the darkness and the huge explosion, Iida accidentally ended up running into a concrete pillar which Uraraka used the debris of as throwing ammo, almost hitting the objective a few times. Boy, 4 eyes. I dealt with the fucking nerd. Bakugo's voice echoed from the only hallway leading to the room. Deku no, Uraraka gasped in horror with her hands in front of her mouth. Excellent work, Bakugo-kun. As expected of villains like us. Iida shouted while looking up a little, still in character for the task. Iida's celebration was used by Uraraka as a distraction as she ran for the bomb in full spirit, which caught Iida's attention. Not so Iida's attempt to run failed as he tripped over and fell only to look at his feet and see them completely covered in webbing. What? Iida questioned and looked at the hallway to see not Bakugo, but instead a completely unscathed Izuku with some form of a strap or collar around his suit's neck. "Sorry Iida, but it had to be done," Izuku stated in Bakugo's voice, while taking off the collar around his neck, switching it back to normal. "Hero Team YE." As All Might announced that, Izuku looked over at the objective to see Uraraka with her hand on it. She quickly ran over to Izuku and hugged him tightly while laughing happily, shouting, "We won. We won." While Izuku removed his mask. "Yeah, we did." Izuku stuttered with a small blush on his face. "But how did you do it? I even heard that big explosion," Uraraka asked with a curious look. "Well. Fuck you." Izuku's eyes widened in shock at the humongous trail of explosions heading towards him, while most of the students watching looked on in fear, as on their screen, they watched as he got completely consumed by the explosions. Bakugo's attack blew a massive hole in the building, causing it to shake while opening it up to light, as Bakugo just kept laughing while insulting Izuku with every breath he drew. Almost as if he was struck with ice, Bakugo stopped his celebration when he saw a huge lump of grey emitting smoke where Izuku was previously standing. In a split second, it shattered, sending solid pieces of debris in every direction. Slowly rising from his crouched position, Izuku looked directly at Bakugo as he let go of the grenade shells in his hands, which made a metal clang as they struck the ground. "I've got to thank Dr. Connors for those web grenades." "How? That was meant to hit you." Bakugo screamed as the vein on his forehead looked ready to burst. "I spent years taking notes on you how you fought. How you acted, it was obvious you'd make something as a form of finisher or ranged attack," Izuku stated as he walked towards Bakugo. Letting out another scream of rage, Bakugo charged towards Izuku who remained straight-faced and emotionless. "Right hook left kick again right kick left hook," Izuku spoke as every action he said Bakugo did without fail, only to be dodged or countered by Izuku. This isn't happening. You're a bug. A fucking quirkless bug. You're beneath me." Bakugo yelled as he leapt back, touching just underneath his nose while walking backwards to see that it was bleeding. Everyone, including All Might, was shocked to see Bakugo shaking as he held onto the pin of his other gauntlet. It makes sense, he's never dealt with someone so overwhelming in power, especially since it's young Midori, All Might thought, as the other students, with the exception of Todoroki, watched silently in awe at the fight. "You're right. I am a bug. I'm a spider and you fell into my web," Izuku stated as he pressed a button on his suit's belt, making 2 web grenades on either side of Bakugo before he was consumed in thick webbing that completely halted his movements and covered his entire body, save his face. "You bastard. You planned this," struggling and trying to break free from the solidifying web, Bakugo yelled at Izuku while he just stood in front of him. "Answer me." His shout was cut short by a splatter of webbing covering his mouth and nose. "I have what I need," Izuku stated, pressing another button on his suit, making a small collar before poking 2 holes in the web so Bakugo could breathe. Muffled screams could be heard from Bakugo and Izuku quickly and quietly, web zipping away from him and up to where he knew the objective was, but stopped for a moment. "I beat Kaken. I actually beat Kaken. And I did it without any harm to myself." Izuku yelled in his head, but remembered he was on a time limit and kept running, but his mind was still telling him to go back. "You need to go back." Izuku's spine shivered as he stopped running when he arrived on the floor he needed to be on and began walking light-footed. "He made you suffer. He deserves to be beaten within an inch of his life." "That's not who I am," Izuku mentally protested against the voice which sounded exactly like the voice in his nightmare last night. "But it's what you want." Izuku stopped after hearing that. It was true. It was as true as Spider-Man. Izuku wanted to run back and hit Bakugo as many times as he could, but he knew there were only 2 options. Win the challenge with his current plan, or put everything on the line just to get payback for all his years of misery. Maybe if it was another time, another opportunity, Izuku would have turned around and given Bakugo what was coming to him, but not now. It wasn't the right thing to do. After several minutes and the transportation of Bakugo in the block of solid webbing, both Team A and Team D were standing in front of All Might and the other students. "Alright. Who can tell me who the best player of that match was?" All Might boomed out and was met with an immediate response from almost everyone. "Midoriya." Although his performance really shouldn't have made that a surprise to him, Izuku looked at them all in shock with a small embarrassed blush across his face. "I have been that good." Izuku stuttered, looking away slightly. "Deku-kun, you really were. You made a quick and effective strategy. You used your own equipment to help your partner when it wasn't required. You looked past a personal grudge and instead used your knowledge of your opponents to beat them with ease. You even completed the whole test without a scratch," Momo said with a serious face and tone, but when she finished, she gave him a bright smile. "And the fact that you're Spider-Man. Kirishima and Kaminari yelled with bright excited eyes. What Izuku shouted in slight shock, not expecting them to figure it out so quickly, but then he realized that he had used not only his webs, but his combat style to deal with Bakugo. Young Midoriya. Could you please escort young Bakugo to the recovery girl's office? All Might asked Izuku, as he could sense the bombardment of questions coming. He still had a class to teach, so this was the only option. Quickly grabbing the sides of the big web block Bakugo was stuck in, Izuku picked it up and ran through the halls of UA until he reached recovery girl's office. After almost an hour of restraining Bakugo so he could get healed, Izuku left recovery girl's office and headed for the changing room so he could get out of his suit. He quickly stopped, however, as when he turned the corner, Izuku saw both Mina and Sayu standing in front of the changing room waiting for him. "Hello? Can I help you?" Izuku asked as he walked towards them with his mask off. The two girls looked at each other before Mina signaled Sayu to go first. "Midoriya-kun, after seeing the fight today, I know that you're Spider-Man. So, I just wanted to say thank you for saving me and my family," Sayu said with a calm smile before walking away, leaving Mina and Izuku alone. "I'm pretty much the same. I just want to do this as a show of thanks." Mina smiled before walking up to Izuku, standing on the tips of her toes and using her soft lips to place a kiss on Izuku's cheek. Izuku froze up as he felt the soft kiss on his cheek before Mina moved away and smiled up at him. "Thanks, I'll see you around," Mina smiled as she walked in the same direction Sayu went. Still blushing like a tomato, Izuku just made embarrassed noises as he struggled to grasp what had just happened. What is it with girls trying to kiss me? Thanks for watching my video and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, link is in the description. See you next time, till then sayonara.